On today's podcast, we're going to learn how addiction is blind. We're going to learn how to pull back the curtain of what addiction really looks like in America and how to know when we have addictive issues to work on. We all face challenges, crucibles in life that make us or break us. What matters is how we respond to such roadblocks. That's really what defines us. Through inspirational stories from all walks of life, this podcast will provide you with techniques to overcome and grow from life's most challenging experiences. Hello, everybody. I'm MaryLee and coming to you live from the Dividend Studios in Brentwood, Tennessee for my podcast, Crucible. You can find me on 8andhealthcoaching.com. And if you like this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share. Addiction doesn't live in dark alleys with needles and arms. The majority of addictions happen right before our eyes with our family members, friends, and coworkers who hide their struggles well. Today, we're going to talk about how addiction doesn't choose. Willpower is not a factor, and we all have something that we're addicted to. Joining us to share today is my guest on Crucible and to share his inspirational story of redemption and his crucible is my guest, Matt Tompkins. He is a broadcast media personality and has been for 17 years in the Omaha area. He produces my show remotely and produces many podcasts from across the country. He's married and has two fur baby Westies, Barley and Teddy. He was born and raised in the Midwest and came from a conservative upbringing. So welcome, Matt. I'm so happy to have you.
It's good to be here on the other side. I'm on the other side of your podcast.
I know, and I can see you. It's so great. It's awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's good to be on your podcast today.
You bet. Well, let's get into your story and talk about, the road that brought you to where you are today, of course, but just how things started for you.
So my addiction to prescription opioids started, it would have been in like 2010. And it started how it starts for a lot of people. It started with some injuries and surgeries and a prescription written by my doctor. And so it really began in 2010. At the end of the year, I was in a car accident, and I had to have lower back surgery in the end of that year. And then in the beginning of the next year, I had a table saw accident with my hand and had to have reconstructive hand surgery. So for about a year there, I was on, first it started off as Vicodin, and then it moved up as my tolerance increased. My doctor increased the amount that I was taking to oxycodone, and oxycodone is really where things quickly spiral out of control because for those that don't know, oxycodone, it's prescription heroin. That's what it is. It is more addictive than morphine. It's on the same level as street meth and crack cocaine as far as how addictive it is. And I had no warning. I had no, hey, when you stop taking this, you're going to go through withdrawals, which is like the worst sickness you could possibly imagine. I had no preparation for any of that. And, you mentioned how addiction doesn't choose. I feel like my story is one I enjoy sharing, and I feel comfortable sharing now because I had everything on paper. If you looked at my life, I had everything going right. And yet I still found myself in this spiral of addiction that consumed my life. And so it can literally happen to anybody. They say it can take less than 7 days of oxycodone prescription to become addicted. Methamphetamine, crack cocaine can take 1 or 2 times doing it, and you're addicted, same as heroin. And so I had everything, going for me. I had, a Midwest kind of traditional family upbringing. I don't think anybody in my family on either side had divorced even. So everybody was very, very whole, structured family unit. Had great parents, a younger brother, had a great upbringing. Got raised in the theater, music, arts, sports. So I had a really kind of just a idyllic upbringing in childhood. And so when I got to this point where I was kind of at the height of my my career, where I was hosting a weekly television show that I also produced here in the Omaha market for NBC that was very popular. I was hosting radio shows every day on the air. So if you looked at me, I was kind of, I joked around. I'm kind of was like the Steve Harvey of Omaha. Like I just had all these things going on, and
that's awesome.
And it was awesome. But at the same time, I remember talking to my therapist, and I felt like I couldn't get the help and didn't know what to do for my addiction because I had no control over it. It was controlling my life, and you know, I couldn't see myself giving up what I had was like my dream job. And so I did what, you know, a lot of people do, as you mentioned, you know, people who are addicted. It isn't that stereotype we think of this guy passed out in the alley with a needle in his arm.
Yeah.
It really is. 70% of addicts in America are functioning addicts. They function, they go to work every day. You would not know that they had an addiction by first glance. My own wife and family had no idea for the first 3 or 4 years of this, had no idea, you know, and so it's something that you hide because there's a tremendous amount of guilt and shame that you feel with this, because the stigma in the past has always been too that it's all your fault, that there's something wrong with you, that you abused this or did something, you know, you made choices that, you know, led you to this. And you know, my case is proof that and many people's are that isn't the case. That, you know, I mean, I have consumed alcohol. I've never had an issue there. Even when I had taken Vicodin, that wasn't really an issue. It was when oxycodone was the thing for me that when I took it, it was almost instantaneous that my brain just became addicted. And so the struggle there was just, you know, how do you get the help that you need? How you feel so trapped. I had nights of suicidal ideation quite a bit when it got really bad, where I would, and that just means that, you know, you never thought about, I'm going to take my own life and I'm going to actually do it. But you think it would be better if I was dead, if somebody ran me off the road. And I've read old journal entries of mine where I was just praying that, you know, that I could die. Like, because that's how desperate of a situation it is with addiction. And real quick, I'll just say, like, the analogy that I use is to kind of help people comprehend how dire it is. On 9/11, we saw the jumpers, people who jumped from the building. And it was so hard for us to fathom. Like, they would choose to jump to their own death rather than the torturous death that was behind them in the building. And so that's how, you know, when you look at people who attempt suicide or think about suicide, the position they're in isn't, you know, amazing life or death. It's, I can continue being tortured until I die, or I can just choose to end it. And so that's why suicide looks like becomes a realistic option to a lot of people. And I was there, where it's like, you don't see a way out. You're in so much pain and torture and agony that you would rather die and just get it over with, because you're suffering so greatly.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful, and especially powerful the way that you just worded that. I guess I'm thinking of the clients that have come to me, and I know there's similarities, but yet there are not. But I know that a lot of the people that are, extremely overweight, they don't know what to do. They've been this way their whole lives, kind of like it was usually a pattern of environment, or just for them, choices that were thrown upon them, even as children. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to get help. They don't want to reach out. They're embarrassed. They're ashamed. I've had people call me instead of their best friend because they don't want to have to tell their best friend how much they weigh. And, so I can totally relate, how it's hard to hide when you're overweight, but you can hide all that pain. And probably that inner turmoil as well, that I'd be better off, if somebody ran me off the road, like you said.
Well, and I think today too, we've become so good at these avatars we've created on social media, where we're living a lie. Basically, we're only portraying the best version of ourselves to the public, to our friends, and even to our family. So then when there is something that has that much shame and guilt that comes with, like, being overweight, there is so much shame that comes with that because of just societally how we've been brought up and told, you know, thin and beautiful is good, and overweight, and, you know, means you're lazy or you're this or whatever the false stereotype might be. And you know, so people, why would you want to come forward? And so I will tell you this much, though, that coming forward, it is very cathartic, and it's the hardest thing to do. But when you do it, I can promise you, everybody who, I can't speak for everybody. I would say everybody I've talked to, when they've come forward, they had the same experience. And that is, you are going to find relief. You are going to find the next steps, whatever they are, because you're no longer in it alone. And I remember at work, I had the last year and a half or 2 years of this. I was just really struggling, and my performance at work was, you know, not that well, and it was kind of in limbo with my position at the radio station I worked at. And my general manager came up one day, and he just saw me outside, and it was just, you know, I was just in this constant state of going through physical withdrawals from not being on pills, and then I would be on them. It's just such a roller coaster. And he said, what's going on? Like, what's going on? And so I told him, and I thought for sure, like, oh, well, I'm going to be fired, or there's this stigma nobody's going to understand. And what I got was the opposite. Yeah. What I got was this gigantic bear hug. And he said, my brother is going through the exact same thing. And he was a pharmacist, his brother, and lost his license and had to find his way back. He ended up getting it back and getting his life back again. He said, Matt, he's like, I can't tell you because of, you know, health regulations, but there are at least 5 people in the building right now who have been to a 30-day rehab in the last 2 years. It's like, you're not alone.
Wow.
And so,
exactly.
And then you tell your family and your friends, and it's like, you know, they may not know what to do or how to respond, because I will tell you, addiction, I totally get it. Personally, I don't understand alcohol addiction, because until you've gone through it, you really don't know. You have no baseline to compare it to. But what people will do, and for the most part, I mean, there are some jerks out there, and there are some bad, you know, family members who will say, you're on your own, you're weak, you're this or that. But by and large, people who really care about you will say, let's figure this out together. They will have empathy. They may not fully understand or relate to it, but they will be there to help you get through it and help find that next step to getting clean, sober, and into recovery.
Yeah, that's fabulous. And God bless your family for that. Because it is, you know, it does take a community. It does take all of us caring about each other. And when you know you're in that, you know you're in a gold spot when you have friends like that, you know, that aren't judgmental. You'd shared with me earlier that you didn't think that willpower was a choice, you know, like just get over it. Yeah. I'm trying to think of the things that clients have shared with me of, well, I was just born that way. I was born heavy. Everybody in my family is heavy. You made bad choices, you know, and again, there's all that shame and those statements of condemnation almost. And maybe none of them applied. You know, a lot of times they've had a medical condition, same thing, they couldn't control. And people look at them like, oh, I don't want to sit by you on the airplane. You know, go somewhere else. So
willpower. It's not to say that the choices we make don't have an impact. That is very true. Like, there are good choices and bad choices we make every minute of every day. And I will not sit here and say like, oh, I made good choices when I was buying pills on the street, or, you know, trying to manipulate the doctor or pharmacy to refill my prescription. So I'm not going to say that like those are good choices. But with my addiction to opioids, and we have now extensive research on addiction and how it chemically affects the brain. And this is not unique to opioids. It is the same. Like, sugar is just as addictive as cocaine and food. And you look at all the sugar and carbohydrates and high fructose corn syrup, which is just sugar in our food. And you look at our reaction to social media and gambling and other things like that. They affect the brain the exact same way. So the thing you have to understand is, yes, I get like people say, well, willpower, I'm going to white knuckle it. I'm just going to get through it. That's the natural reaction. For pretty much all of human history, it's a matter of are you strong or are you weak, and, it's one thing, like, I know I think churches and religious organizations have come a long way in how we accept and help people with addictions. But there was this thing like, well, you must have done something wrong to deserve, you deserve this, or you did this. You're the one who chose to do the drugs. Therefore, that's why you're addicted, whatever it might be. And really, what we know now is that our brain is chemically altered. It's especially so. It's with all those things that I mentioned. It's especially so with opiates like heroin or oxycodone, methamphetamine or Adderall, which is just a chemical carbon compound away from being methamphetamine, and crack cocaine. Those three are probably the most highly potent versions of this. But what they do, in a larger degree than the others, but it happens with all addictions, is your brain is chemically changed. You are no longer the same person you were when you started prior to taking those. And it's important to realize that, because if you can know that and accept that, okay, this isn't me making these decisions anymore. It's my brain has been changed. What happens when you go through addiction, I realized I had a problem, and I think a lot of people can connect with this who have been through something similar. It's when you transition from I'm taking this every day to feel good or to get high or whatever it is, to I'm taking this now so that I don't get sick. Because when your brain goes through withdrawals, that is because your brain has been chemically altered to be completely dependent on these drugs. So your brain can no longer naturally produce dopamine and any other feel-good chemicals that you would normally get. So if you stop taking something cold turkey, that's why alcohol, opiates, and these stronger, narcotics are so dangerous and can be deadly, because your brain can you can have seizures and you can die from withdrawals being that severe. So your brain is going to convince you to do anything and everything to not be sick, because your brain interprets that as we are dying. We need to get the one thing that will keep us alive, even though that's the very thing that's causing us to go through those withdrawals. It is this, the committee in your brain is kind of hijacked by one voice that's saying, we can't feel like this. We can't function. We're going to die. So it's just survival mode, completely survival mode by your brain. So when you look at it that way and you say, okay, it's not just a matter of me wanting this more or having the willpower not to eat a cookie or the willpower to not, take this pill or this whatever, or to log on to social media, or I have to have my phone with me everywhere I go. I mean, that's a behavioral addiction that we can't live without it. We have to understand that our brains are chemically changed, and just like our bodies are, as with health coaching, like we slowly gain the weight. It's going to slowly take time to lose the weight and keep it off permanently. And it takes the brain 2 full years to recover from opiate addiction from the last time you took an opiate.
Wow.
2 full years for your brain to recover.
Wow.
And the truth is, you probably won't be the same person you were prior to that ever. And that can sound scary and that can sound daunting, but I can tell you this, that from my experience, if you reach out to get help, if you work whatever program it is you need to work, it could be SMART, program, it could be NA or AA, seeing a therapist and a specialist, an addiction specialist, whatever it is, or a health coach like with you, with your clients that you help on a regular basis.
Yeah.
When you reach out and you ask for help and you admit, I'm not in this alone, I can't do this alone, I need help, and you start doing that, yes, you are going to be a different person for the better, though, because as torturous as those 8 years of my life were, looking back, I would not change them for anything, because I remember I was 35 and I remember I got hired. I was still doing, I'm 6 years into my recovery as of this past January. And so my first year there that I was like, in the last couple of years, it was kind of on and off, and I had 6 months clean and I would have a relapse. And so the last couple of years weren't as severe, but I remember getting, when I was 35, and I remember I got this hired to do a news talk radio show, which was kind of a dream gig. And I'm doing that and doing the TV show. And I'm like, I could not have accepted this job or done this job without going through what I also consider to be my crucible. And I feel like these crucibles that we face, that you talk about every week on your podcast, they are what define us, for good or for bad.
Yeah.
Because, you think about all the struggles you've been through in your life. Would you change that? It sucks that this happened. It was hard.
No.
But that's how you find out who you really are, and it shapes you for being a better person from that point moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. My crucible goes back a lot further than 8 years.
Yeah.
So
it could be a lifetime.
More like 43 years, of my life. Yeah. Or even longer. So.
And talking about it,
really
MaryLee, I can say that too. Like talking about it with people. You start with those who you trust and you can be vulnerable with, but moving forward from there, sometimes talking to complete strangers is more cathartic and easier to do than someone you know really well. Talking to a therapist, or then eventually speaking out publicly. I knew that when I went through my ordeal, I said, what helped me, ironically, was I'm very into learning about what was going on in my brain. So I was doing a lot of internet research of learning about how addiction, how it works, what are withdrawals, why do I feel this way? This is horrible. What is going on with my body right now? And then learning about it in that sense, but then also reading the stories that other people were sharing. And I remember I read a story about Eminem, the rapper, and I could go either way. It's not like I'm a huge Eminem fan or anything, but I know him casually like everybody else does, as an artist. And I remember reading an article about how he was taking 60 Vicodin a day and 30 Xanax a day. And I remember thinking, that's about the same amount of pills I was taking, same drugs. And I thought it kind of clicked in my head when I read that. I started looking back at all these figures from Johnny Cash to you name it. Robert Downey Jr., you name the person that you look up to, whether they're a writer, an artist, an actor, a musician, and they have all had these struggles. And that's what it kind of clicked with me. And I thought, if these people who I look up to that have it all can still fall into this trap. Again, addiction doesn't choose whether you're rich or poor, black or white. It doesn't choose based on anything.
Yeah.
It is an equal opportunity destroyer. And so if you look at it that way, then it looked a lot less daunting, because I thought, well, if this happened to him, it isn't just me. And so I always felt a duty to talk about my story when I felt comfortable and felt like I was in a secure place to talk about it, that I would be more than happy to talk about it. And I'd probably overshare with people too much, and just brag, casual conversations. I'll probably share too much, but I feel like we keep this stuff locked in and we don't talk about it. And you look at, just things that we all do. There's that book, Everybody Poops, to get kids to say, listen, this is something everybody goes through, or talking about sex or relationships, or the addictions, the bad relationships, bad people we've been addicted to, the food, our weight, our health, the drugs and alcohol. It can be any of those things. As long as you aren't talking about them, you aren't even giving yourself the opportunity to find a way through it.
That's beautiful. If you aren't talking about them, you're not giving yourself the opportunity to get through them. Yeah, and the only way to get through stuff is to go literally through the middle of it, But first, by admitting you have a problem. So you shared a lot about, and I guess I'd never thought about this until we've had several conversations about social media being an addiction, and also an addiction to your phone. And I know you've shared that, these companies want you to be, and they set it up so that you become addicted. So share a little bit more about that. And there are many, many more
behavioral
areas.
Behavioral addictions are the dominant form of addictions. When we think of addiction, again, we usually think of the stereotype of like drugs or alcohol. But the reality is we all have something. Likely, I'm not saying we all, but like I would be shocked to find somebody who doesn't have something that they have been addicted to or are currently addicted to. And you may be thinking, well, I'm not addicted. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I eat healthy. And then, we all get that weekly report at the end of the week on our phone. And it says, I spent 3 hours a day on my phone. And we don't even notice it. People who say that they would rather give up their kids for a month than lose their cell phone for a weekend. These are real stats. People say they would rather lose their hand than their phone, And it is when you look at it that way, you look at this lens of, okay, let's define what is an addiction. It's something that we can't live without, that is not healthy, not good for us, that is this dominating and taking precedent over other things and people in your life. So, with drugs, that becomes the thing you care about the most, more than people, more than yourself. You're destroying yourself. But let's take a look at social media and the apps. And this really came in 2011, around that area, when the Facebook, Instagram, all these apps became mobile apps on our mobile devices. They were on our phones. And so you look, okay, well, it's harmless social media. But we have, 10 years of data or more that shows this is very harmful. You look at the rate of self-harm and suicide attempts by young girls and young teenage girls. It is up over 151%. In just the last 2 years, with COVID, it increased an additional 51%. So it is very destructive. So if we're looking at other people, looking at your mental health, and it's like, how many times you've been sitting at home and you're like, well, I don't have a problem. I can set it down. I can walk away from it. And how many times do you find yourself tapping that phone for the refresh to see if you got a text or an email? Or how many times have you refreshed your email just to see if you got something new? It's like hitting the slot machine. We're waiting for that, that response, that dopamine release, which your brain releases dopamine when those things happen. And so a great documentary is The Social Dilemma. And this is where people who are the heads of Google, Apple, Facebook, Instagram, all of these apps, who used to be with the company, who created and found the guy who created Gmail, and they literally spell out in very plain terms that they intended to make all these things addictive, that they preyed on our addictions. One of my favorite quotes is from Steve Jobs, who said he was asked why he never allowed his own teenage kids, to have an iPhone or an iPad. And his quote was, "You never get high on your own supply." We hear that with drugs, but that's true with this. I mean, there are two consumer bases that we refer to as users. One is drug users, the drug cartels. The other is social media platforms. You're a user.
Wow.
And so, so when you stop and think about that, or you think about how many times are you eating, and I'm guilty of this, so it's not said in a judgmental way, but like how many times have you eaten? For me, it's like Ritz crackers. Like a sleeve of Ritz crackers will just disappear overnight. And I'm like, what the hell just happened? Like, where did they go? It's the same thing. You're like, You know what? I'm stressed out. I can have a Coca-Cola or a sugary drink, or I can eat McDonald's, or I can do this or that, and whatever it is. And eventually it turns into this thing that we're using to fill this emptiness, this void inside of us.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to deal with the underlying issues. So then you compound the unhealthy diet with social media, where we're looking at people, and like we said, we're all avatars. We look at the Kardashians who've been airbrushed 1,000 times. Nobody is really the filters and everything else. And we think, God, I'm not that beautiful. I'm not that happy. But we can't look away.
Or that rich.
I'm not that rich.
Yeah.
And we can't look away. We scroll and scroll and scroll. And so then when we feel that shame from that, then we turn to the food, the unhealthy foods. Or another one people don't realize they do is binge watching TV. We talk about binge eating, And if I told you, is binge eating good? Pretty much everybody would say, well, no, it's binge eating. Why do we think binge watching is good? Nobody talks about how watching 10 straight hours of your Netflix show of choice is unhealthy. And it really boils down to we are trying to numb ourselves, our bodies and our minds from having to deal with the underlying issues. And I will tell you that suffering is a part of the human experience. We try and numb ourselves from that, and we shouldn't. Pain is part of the healing process. And, you think about all your successes and all your happiness, they would not feel happy. They would not feel like these great accomplishments if you hadn't had your lows. And that's why, to circle back to the title of your podcast and my belief, that the crucibles you go through are the most important things. Just like business people will tell you, the failures in their career are far more impactful and crucial than their successes. So if you don't welcome in the pain and the suffering that's part of the human experience, and we numb ourselves with these addictive things to drugs, alcohol, behavioral addiction, social media, food, binge watching TV, if we numb ourselves, we're not only blocking our ability to feel the pain, we're blocking our ability to feel joy and happiness just the same.
Yeah, right. And which is not anybody's intention, I'm sure. But it's easier to be in denial, I think, over a lot of this. Most people would not admit that they are addicted to half of the things that you've spoken about. And who wants to go through that pain? It's just easier to numb it and go on with your life. And because it's socially acceptable to be on social media, to be on your phone, to have your business on your phone.
I'm shocked.
Yes, to have a drink.
There's I forget the title of the book, but I think it's called like How a Girl Can Quit or How a Woman Quits. But it's all about these pressures, especially for women in this like drinking alcohol culture that we have. And, it's really kind of shocking when you take a step back and see the forest that is actually in front of you, in that we do. It's like, you're looked at as there's something wrong with you if you're the one person in the group that doesn't want to have a drink. The response is, why? What's wrong? Are you okay? Can you not handle your drink? No, what? Let's look at is it normal to say I don't really feel like having a drink because I just don't feel like having one? It's healthier for me not to. I'm better off not to. So I'm making that choice. Is that healthy? Or what we tend to see as healthy is, no, it's perfectly fine to have 3 glasses of wine every night when you get home from work. 3 glasses of wine, that's a lot of alcohol. That's a lot of numbing.
That's a bottle.
That's a bottle. Yeah. And so we kind of have to step back, and it's hard to be honest with ourselves. All these things I mentioned are things I too have struggled with and continue to struggle with. I mean, I'm not perfect. I still have, I'm not anywhere close to perfect. I mean, I have bad days and I deal with depression and anxiety, and, work can become an addiction where it's like, I'm just going to keep pushing through and just keep going.
Yeah. Another acceptable one.
Yeah. But again, we deny ourselves the ability to experience joy and happiness when we numb ourselves. And that's one thing with opioids. I'll tell you that is a drug that numbs you physically. It also numbs you emotionally. And so that means, when you come out of that and you get into recovery, you start to all these sensations and feelings, and it can be overwhelming in the beginning, but it's like these memories and feelings, the smells, or when you look at the night sky and it brings back childhood memories that make you tear up. You didn't feel any of that. These good memories, these good feelings, you lose all of that. So yeah, I'm not going to feel depressed, but I'm also not going to feel happy. I'm just numbed, and I'm in this constant limbo,
Yeah.
Constant purgatory.
That's a good one. Yeah. I remember I'd gone into see a female doctor, and I was just having issues of probably being perimenopausal. And the first thing she did, and I'm sitting there bawling in her office all of a sudden, because I'm just desperately wanting some help. And so the first thing she does is she prescribes an antidepressant for me. And I go on that, and I felt like I was flatlined. You know, there's no up, there's no down. I was literally not flatline dead, but just flatline emotionally. And I went off of it. It was like, I can't do this. And I never went back to see her because I thought this is not the problem, obviously, that you're trying to help.
Any prescription drug and antidepressants are really, because I've been through that too. And a lot of times they have side effects. The truth of the matter is every credible study points to antidepressants working for people with severe depression and severe anxiety for 18 months, and then they don't work because your body becomes tolerant to them. So you have to take more or additional medications. And the reality is when they do their scale of on a scale of 1 to 5, how impactful is this drug versus something like, let's say, a good night's sleep. Antidepressants are like a 1.2 or 1.3. A good night's sleep is over 3 points out of 5. So a good night's sleep is twice as beneficial for you, for your depression and anxiety, as an antidepressant. And that's not to say I've been through severe depression, and there are times postpartum depression. There are situations that were, people need that medication. And so it's not to say that's bad, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's normal to have highs and lows in this emotional human experience. If you can't get out of bed and you can't function, I've been there where it's just, you can't, you would rather die than exist. I mean, yes, get a doctor to help you get through that. But in the long term, I think we think, antidepressants will just make me happy all the time. And that's not what they're designed to do. And that's not what they're capable of doing.
Yeah, exactly. It helps you out of that constant purgatory, but it still is not giving you that freedom, like you said, to feel the joy and happiness in your life. That's just, to me, that's the whole point. So,
absolutely,
Matt, I sure appreciate your time. And man, you are so knowledgeable and spitting out all those facts and stats. And I appreciate that. You have figured out a lot of why, whatever you went through, how it's affected you. And I just applaud you for your sobriety and just continuing to want to help people.
Yeah.
I think there can't ever be too much oversharing, when it comes to that. And if you turned around to me in the grocery store and told me that, I would have been like, wow, tell me more. I just think it's so incredible.
The stigma
in
is
your
definitely
story.
breaking. It's still there, but it's not as bad as it was 10, 20 years ago, for sure. The last thing I would leave people with is that I did things the hard way. I always tell people I did things the hardest way possible. The only thing that could have made it harder is if I just died. I mean, I have overdosed several times. And so the fact that I'm still here today alive and breathing is a miracle in and of itself. And so I tell people, you don't have to do it the way that I did it. I mean, I refused to go into treatment. I refused to, to really get into a program and work a program. I really did it I tried to do it and ended up doing it myself, which is I'm a rare case study of getting through. And I say myself, I mean, still with my family, friends, and support, but as far as I never checked into an inpatient treatment center type of situation. And, I look back on it and I wish I had done it the smart way and not the hard way, because I probably would have gotten 5 years of my life back had I just bucked up and done it, and just said, listen, the TV show, the career, that'll still be there when you get out. Spend 90 days, get the help you need, and then go back to doing that, and instead of prolonging it and just doing it the hard way. So I've learned a lot and I'm happy to share that with people. But at the same time, I would tell people, don't do it the way I did it. Ask for help, get help, do this with people who care about you, professionals and personally, and you can get out of it a lot faster and get back to a happy place in your life a lot faster than I think people realize. When I was addicted, I would always look back and I would say, man, had I gone to rehab 3 months ago, I'd be getting out clean, sober, and on my path to recovery. And every 3 months I would think that. And then it would be years. And I would think, man, had I done that 3 years ago, I wouldn't have been suffering the last 3 years like I have been. And then it's 8 years. Yeah. And it's like, wait a minute. At some point, it's okay.
Enough's enough. Yeah.
I think it's a Abraham Lincoln quote, maybe, that's, what better time than now, and what better person than you? So there is no perfect time to do it. You just got to do it.
What better time than now? What better person than you? Fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Matt. You're amazing, and I just wish you all the best in the world. And thank you for producing my show every week. And a shout out to Two Brothers Creative here in Omaha. And I'm here in Nashville. And so, yay, how awesome is that we can be connected and we're not even close.
Yeah.
So,
well, thanks for having me.
Anyway, you bet. Have a great week.